program, we're going to have sorry about that. We're going to have Alan introduce from AARP introduce our speaker.
Thank you, Elle, and thank you for all of you who put time and energy into this relaunch of our program. And I'm happy to be here. And we're glad to have AARP as a partner in this, along with the High Country Lifetime Learners, our Appalachian State program at the Department of Recreation, and the Watauga Library. We hope that you will find this enjoyable as we try to broaden the reach of this effort. One of the things as a volunteer with AARP, you don't already know, one of our goals is to make communities livable for people of all ages. And we do that by reaching out to partners in the community, and that can be everything from our aging, our services on aging, our libraries, public officials. And we're happy to have the university as part of this because we have made a concerted effort in the High Country to engage multi-generational activities. So we're really pleased today to be living up to that goal and having a variety of participants in putting this forward today. And in part of making livable communities, it's important to have fellowship and spirituality as a part of that community. And it is central for so many cultures. But it's also important to be sensitive and respect that there's a diversity of spiritual paths, and different communities historically and currently follow those different paths. So today we get a chance to explore that in a more deep way with the program today. So thank you all for being here. And if you want to learn more about the activities of AARP North Carolina's Mountain Region, I think we're going to put up the website for our Mountain Region programs and encourage you to take a look at those activities. A lot of programs are still going forward. We have a multitude of volunteer opportunities, as Judith Phoenix will attest, plenty of opportunities to engage in our community. And we hope you will take advantage of that and find something that suits you. Because of all the diversity of the work we do, there's probably a place for your interest and a place where you can become part of our work in building a healthier, happier community. So with that, today it's my pleasure to welcome our presenter, Dr. Linda Jensen. Dr. Jensen has a degree in cultural anthropology from the University of Oregon. That's her PhD. She's also studied in other parts of the country. And through those activities and also through her research, she's had many opportunities to engage with members of other Native American cultures. She's had experience in the Northeast with members of the Iroquois Confederation, the tribes there. In her time in Fargo, North Dakota, she became exposed and interacted with tribes from the high plains of the Northern Plains, Lakota and Anishinaabe, and also in the Southwest with Apache and Navajo cultures. And through those experiences and her research, she's become quite knowledgeable and appreciative about the cultures and particularly the spiritual practices of those tribes. And so we're tickled to have her with us today to share that knowledge and experience. Welcome, Dr. Jensen.
Hello. Okay.
Hello, welcome.
I'm going to drum us into the proper mood, and we've had some difficulty. The drum has a negative effect on the program, so I'm going to try and drum quietly enough that it doesn't overwhelm the sound system, and then it goes quiet and you can't hear it at all. So okay, we're ready. In American culture, when our teenagers started listening to rhythmic music, at first jazz and later rock and roll, our spiritual leaders were horrified because in European culture, the drum is considered somewhat dangerous and profane. But in every Native American culture that I'm aware of, the drum is a sacred instrument that helps people transform themselves into a more spiritual type of person and make themselves more open to spiritual influences from the many, many Native American spirits that were worshipped on this continent. And I cannot emphasize enough that there is no Native American culture. There were many different cultures, and I like to joke about, oh yeah, I totally understand European culture. Those guys in togas who wore those Nazi helmets and ate lutefisk and went to bullfights, and there was never a culture that did all those things together. And so a lot of what we think of as Native American culture, there was never any one culture that did all those things together. And so when I'm going to talk about Native American religions, I want to emphasize they're real religions. Real religions emphasize and support the social structure. Real religions teach rules and morality. Real religions help people through times of trouble. Real religions bring people together. And yeah, they're religions, plural. Some of them completely different from one another. And because each of them enforced the social system that accompanied them, if you had people who lived in villages and were organized into matrilineal clans and who farmed for a living, their religion is going to be largely based on supporting those things. If you have hunting people who don't live in villages, who follow the animals that they're hunting and aren't organized into any kind of clans, let alone matrilineal, you're going to have a very different religion there. There were some tribal groups that were organized into chiefdoms, which were pretty hierarchical. And a few of those chiefdoms, such as the ones along the Mississippi River, were practicing becoming formal states. You know, the United States is a formal state. We think of Europe, all those kingdoms throughout European history, the Roman Empire, those were formal states, really hierarchical. And so those religions would have enforced obedience to hereditary leaders. And those religions would have had high priests instead of just shamans who lived among the people and were just extra spiritual members of the common group. So everything is going to be based on reinforcing the rules of the culture, the political structure, the family structure, gender relationships, friendly or not so friendly relationships with neighbors. And so very different religions. There were approximately 500 different organized Native American political entities when Europeans first arrived here. And so some of them shared common religions, but there were hundreds of religions on this continent, not quite 500, but an awful lot. So how do I talk about a continent with this much diversity in one short little talk? I've decided what I'm going to do is I'm going to try and teach about Native American religion by talking about some of the stereotypes that white culture often has about Native American religions. And I'm going to refute a lot of them. I'm going to tell you, yeah, that's sort of right about some of them. And I think there's one where I'm actually going to say, yep. No, there's two where I'm going to say, yep, that applies. So one stereotype is that they would have been super primitive. You know, they wouldn't have great mythology. They wouldn't have deep philosophy, but they did. They weren't just magic, and it wasn't just hunting magic, because like I said, a lot of people were involved in long distance trade. A lot of people were involved in farming. And so, yeah, hunting went along with it. If you look at this continent, you didn't have a lot of creatures readily available to be domesticated. There weren't any horses here until the Spanish lost a few and they got loose, and the Indians said, oh, the spirits have brought us Shunkawakan. That's what the Dakota people, North and South Dakota, are named after. They said, oh, the spirits love us so much, they've sent us a sacred dog. It's so much bigger than the original dog. It can not only pull our belongings on a travois, we can ride on it. Only our children could ride on our dogs. This is a really cool, special dog. We are blessed. And they would do a lot of Thanksgiving ritual. So not just hunting magic, planting rituals, and Thanksgiving rituals. Thanksgiving for the harvest. I mean, where did those white people get the idea for the Thanksgiving that we celebrate in the United States? Even our myth about where that came from includes learning a lot of the idea from Indians. So harvest Thanksgiving, hunting Thanksgiving, family Thanksgiving, tribal history Thanksgiving. The Iroquois had sacred strawberry juice for their Thanksgiving rituals. And no, they did not ferment it first. They used fresh strawberry juice. Fermented stuff, not so much. Another stereotype, Mother Earth. They all worshipped some version of Mother Earth. Well, their cultures are very different from European cultures, and they were not nearly as patriarchal. So women in Native American cultures weren't just mothers. They were tribal leaders, they were warriors, they were medicine women, they were spiritual leaders. They were the founder of the clan, because often as not, especially in the East, well, actually much more often in the Eastern United States, the planting cultures had mother-based clans, nothing based on who your father was. Your identity didn't come from there. And so they would have founding mothers. Furthermore, in Native American tribes, brotherhood was more important, sisterhood, and especially bridging between men and women through the special relationship that brothers and sisters have. So there were an awful lot of sacred stories about brother and sister spirits who did special things to perhaps in the dawn of creation. And so a Mother Earth, who was just an earthy kind of goddess who was fertile, and men used her for sex, and she had lots of babies, and she somehow made plants grow. It was way more complicated than that, much more roles for women. There were volcano goddesses, there were creator goddesses, there was Wope, white buffalo woman, who brought all of the sacred rituals to the Dakota, the most sacred being in their pantheon, because she was their teacher. Spider Woman of the Southwest. And often Native people would say this, oh, these Christians are coming and they think their religion is so special because they worship a father god. Well, to us, that fathers are not fully mature, grandfathers and grandmothers. So the Dakota people will say a prayer of thank you to Tunkasha, the grandfather and grandmother as well. But the Southwestern people often worship Spider Woman, and she was grandmother Spider, because grandfathers and grandmothers are both wiser than just mothers and fathers. So when the Christians showed up and said they worshiped a father god, the Indians' attitude was often, well, we worship grandfather god, and grandfathers and grandmothers are wiser. So Mother Earth, grandmother Earth was a lot more important. And so were all of the sister goddesses and the single woman goddesses. And yeah. Now here's one I'm going to say, yeah, it's very true for some tribes, vision quests. But the hierarchical tribes, the chiefdoms, and the ones that were verging on formal government like Europeans have, they were hierarchical. You don't want your ordinary citizens having all that self-confidence that you can gain by going out on a vision quest. So it was the hunting cultures that were usually more interested in making sure every member of the tribe could think for himself and had great self-confidence, and every member of the tribe had their own personal spirit guide. Tribes that had high priests, like at the great city of Cahokia, the biggest city on this continent prior to the arrival of the Europeans, they had a central pyramid mound with sacred temples on top of it, where their high priests did rituals. They weren't going to be into vision quests at all. If you've got your own spirit guide, what do you need the high priest for? And so, yes, vision quests. In some of the cultures, but in others, oh no, no, no. You can only learn your appropriate religion from the high priest, not from doing your own thing and going out and praying directly to the spirits. Another feature of vision quests, we get the idea that, oh, this is the young men only. No, there would often be a modified version that women could go on vision quests as well. We also think of vision quests as something that a religious Indian would go off and do alone. Yes, they often went to sacred places like Bear Butte in the Central Plains, this great volcano remnant that's sticking up out of the ground, otherwise completely flat, and then all of a sudden there's Bear Butte. People would go there, vision quests. And they would also do public vision quests, the Sundance ceremony of the Northern Plains, which was getting down into the Southern Plains as well by the time it was stopped by the United States government. Vision quests such as the very public way of doing that particular vision, the Sundance. Person suffers publicly and cries for a vision publicly. And just by attending and watching and assisting, bringing the person crying for a vision, suffering, engaging in public self-torture, piercing their skin to show the spirits just how sincere they are and just how badly they're seeking spiritual revival. Just by attending, you can get a little bit of a spiritual boost. And believe it or not, the Vietnam War inspired a great revival of the public vision quest, the Sundance. There are even white and African American people begging the shamanic leaders of the vision quest to let them, because we all know about post-traumatic stress disorder. We all know how damaging going through a war, seeing your friends killed, being wounded, having to kill others, yourself, and the guilt that brings on. The Sundance was revived as a way to Indians to help other Indians get over that post-traumatic stress disorder, crying for vision, asking the native spirits to heal you and make you stronger and better. And like I said, after the Vietnam War, there were an awful lot of people who weren't Indian trying to find an Indian shaman who would lead them through that particular experience. The idea that Native people worshiped a great spirit, that ultimately most of them or all of them were really monotheists, and that there was a great spirit comparable to the Christian Father God. Not really. They were polytheists all over the continent. They all had multiple spirits. Now, some had a god that was a little bit more important than the other spirits. For example, on the Northern Plains, the Dakota people worshipped Wakantanka, and Wakantanka has been translated Great Spirit, but what it actually means is great mystery. So again, when the Christian missionaries showed up and said, it's all in this book here, you guys don't have a book, we've got a book, and it's all in the book. The Indians said, the great mystery is unknowable by any one being. By studying the Great Spirit and doing vision quests and ritual and prayer your entire life, you can only know a tiny bit of the great mystery. That's why it's the great mystery. And you people think it's all in one book? No, the great mystery is so much greater than any one mind can comprehend, or even than the teachings of any one species can comprehend. And I will get into the role of animals in a moment. But many of the tribal religions, again, the Dakota people who I got to know really well when I lived up there, they had one creator god, Wakantanka, the great mystery. And the great mystery got kind of bored being there in the void before creation. And so at the dawn of creation, rather than, oh, I'll start with an earth and a sun, Wakantanka split into the different gods of the pantheon. First one god, then another god, then that first god split into another god. And as Europeans, we might think, oh, well, the god is going to make himself a goddess when he split. No. Again, it's not just male, female, husband, wife, father, children, but all of the family relationships and friendships are incredibly important. So one of those splintering gods at the dawn of creation made himself a best friend. Another one decided to make himself a daughter. Another one did what a European would have done. The sun god made himself a moon wife. But do they all worship a great spirit? No. there are many, many, many spirits. And in the English language, partly because of the utter lack of understanding of what a non-hierarchical religion would look like, when Europeans said, oh, who is this being? The Iroquois corn woman. She's one of three sisters, corn, beans, and squash. And the Europeans said, well, that doesn't sound like our great creator God. So I guess these people don't have gods. We'll say that they have spirits that they believe in, but no gods, unless maybe we can reinterpret one of their gods to be a great spirit like ours. A lot of misunderstanding when Europeans were trying to figure out what these Indian people are doing. Another feature that you often have with these multiple polytheistic spirit beings, where you find grandmother gods like Grandmother Spider in the many different tribes of the Southwest, it's often a pair of the really important spirits in the religion are the grandmother and her grandson, skipping a generation. If we go up to the Chehalis people on the Northwest coast in the state of Washington, the Chehalis worshipped earth-moving woman, known to the white folks as Mount St. Helens, and her grandson, Hone, a moon god, a trickster god. He got away with a lot. He was a problem grandson. But in the process of his troublemaking escapades, he also managed to create an awful lot of the earth that we now live in. You also wind up with some other interesting pairs of people, brothers, and they may have a grandmother back there somewhere, rather than a grandmother and one grandson, like Spider Woman in many of the Southwestern people. She had two grandsons among the Navajo, the monster slayers. In Navajo land, you know, you've got all that erosion and bare desert. There are an awful lot of dinosaur skeletons eroding out of the landscape there. And so the Navajo people looked around and said, more monster remains. Man, this place used to be covered with monsters. The ancient gods at the dawn of creation must have killed them all to clear the way for us, make it safe for us here. So grandmother Spider and the two twin grandsons, the monster slayers, are very important in Navajo religion. So great spirit, yeah, a little bit, mostly not. Medicine men, you've heard that there were medicine men, and there are a lot of really bad old Hollywood movies where it's going to be the medicine man telling everybody, go kill those white people, make war, keep being good idea. Oh boy. Yes, there were medicine men, and often it actually translated fairly well, that their word for spiritual and their word for medicine, you know, if you even go back in European history, the first hospitals, well, okay, the first hospitals in Europe were Islamic religious institutions taking care of people's physical health. But then you had Christian religion taking over religious hospitals. I guess here in North Carolina, if you're really lucky, they take you to Baptist Hospital, where they're supposed to be really, really good at healing people. So the idea that medicine and spirituality go together, that's pretty common in much of the world. You know, you go to ancient Egypt, you go to a temple to find a doctor. And so, yes, medicine men, but also medicine women. And also, depending on what kind of culture you had, you may have medicine men and women at odds with the high priest in the hierarchical cultures. So, yes, we have healing as a very important part of Native American ritual. You know, if you can't make things better here on earth, if you can't heal a physical body, how are you going to heal somebody's spirit? So the two go together. And there would often be some kind of a spiritual calling, perhaps on a vision quest. The person would experience something that led them to believe. For example, among the Apache, I knew an Apache medicine man, and it had come up in conversation with a history professor that the Apache, one of the different powers you could acquire as an Apache medicine man was bear power. And if you were called to bear power, you would study with an Apache shaman who had bear power. And then you would graduate from studying with the human shaman, and you would move into a bear cave and study with a bear, literally. And so I knew that this Apache that I knew was a medicine man. So I asked him, "Did you live in a bear cave?" And he said, "No, the panther in the cave where I went for my panther power never would have put up with a bear in there too. It was bad enough on my panther to have me in there." So animal power, a lot of Native American religions believe that the wisdom about life on earth, about the creation, about the spirit world is distributed among all the different species. And so if you want to do your duty and be spiritual and get closer to the gods or the great mystery, perhaps you need to go on a vision quest on Bear Butte, where there used to be a lot of bears. Or you know that there's a panther living in this particular cave. I asked that particular Apache medicine man, "How did you get the panther to put up with you moving into his cave?" And he said, the family would save money and purchase a quarter of a cow from a butcher before it got cut up into little steaks and sausages. A quarter of a cow. That would keep your panther or your bear very well fed. And as long as you stayed away from the meat that you brought, he'd be so well fed, if you were fortunate, he would put up with you living in the cave with him for a while. When the meat ran out, it might be a really good idea to go, having hopefully acquired some sacred knowledge of the spiritual universe that only panthers and those who politely request of them would know. And so I've tied in medicine people and vision quests, and I'm getting to the animal thing. But I do want to mention the next thing that I've got written down here. It's the assumption that Native American religions were not moral. You know, Christianity is very concerned with sins and long lists of don't do this, and don't do this other thing either. There are actually 3 lists of 10 in the Old Testament. And of course, the priests, generation after generation, have come up with an awful lot longer list of things not to do. And so Christianity likes to assume maybe it's the only moral religion out there, but you can't be interested in the rules of family, the rules of political leadership, the rules of interacting with the species that you hunt without being a moral religion. And that brings us to the idea of rules and roles and role models, and how a Native American person is supposed to conduct themselves in any of these traditional religions. You're required to be good. You're required to try to learn more spiritual truth as your life goes on. You're required to improve yourself. However, I'm not aware of any Native American religion that had a concept of heaven and hell. Everybody went to the same place. Some spirits could lose their way, and that might have something to do with misbehavior. Some Native religions, a small minority of them, believed in witchcraft. And it's debated how much they already had the concept of witchcraft and how much the first Christian missionaries taught them to believe in witchcraft. But the Apache medicine man that I knew somewhat, he was a witch hunter. His panther power allowed him to recognize and subdue witches. Apache and Navajo, who are culturally related, linguistically related, and religiously related, are very concerned with witchcraft and afraid of it and opposed to it. And yet they do not believe in anything resembling a devil. Witchcraft is human evil, passed down from bad medicine man to bad medicine student. Among the Apaches, unlike among the Christians, most witches were believed to be male. Or did I use past tense there? Among the most traditional Apache and among the most traditional Navajo, they still believe and fear witches. And they need witch hunters to deal with them for them. Let's get to those animal spirits. Yes, very important in all Native religions. I'm going to talk a little bit at a time here. Talk a little bit, because I do want to get to your questions. Talk a little bit about the Iroquois religion. Iroquois religion, Iroquois culture, Iroquois political system, they had representative democratic government. And rather than representing regions or neighborhoods or parts of states or representing a whole state, they had representatives who were sent to councils in various levels. There was a village council, there was a tribal council, and then there were the 5 confederated tribes. There was a national council. And at each level, it was the matrilineal clans, the elder women of the clans voted. Women got to vote, but they could only vote for a male member of their own clan and send him on to represent them. They also had the right to recall if he didn't really represent them. And so Iroquois culture, land ownership, where you live, the clan elders, who are all women, of course, assigned apartments in Iroquois longhouses. They assigned farmland to the women. And of course, because they're matrilineal, the husband moved in with the wife and her clan in the clan longhouse. But every clan was represented by a clan totem. There was a turtle clan. There was a loon clan. Most of the clans associated somehow with water. Water reptiles, water mammals, water birds. Because in their creation story, which of course is going to have to focus on a woman who is the mother of the people, not a father of the people, There was a man and a woman living above the earth in the heavens. And there are different versions of what happened, but somehow the woman who was already pregnant fell, and she began falling through the sky. And the birds, long distance from the other world up above, she had a long time to fall. The birds got to know her, and the birds got to know that they really liked her and they didn't want her to die. When she landed in the primordial ocean, it was only sky and ocean. The only firmament, the only land was in heaven up above. And she fell from that spiritual realm. And the birds flew down to the turtles, and they flew down to the muskrats, and they flew down to the animals that were swimming on the top of the primordial ocean. And they said, there's a very special being coming. We're calling her first woman, and she's with child of a whole new species we've never seen before. And we've got to do something. She's not going to be able to live in the water. And she can't even control her movements in the sky. She's just falling. And so Turtle dove down under the ocean and said, you can put the land on me. And the loon swam down, and Muskrat swam down, and all the other clans, totems, swam to the bottom of the primordial ocean to bring up dirt and put it on the back of Turtle. They created this continent for first woman. And so every clan in the Iroquois political system, family system, class system, there are no classes because every clan is equal. No clan is better than any other. They all get to share in the land and what comes from the land, because every clan's original totem helped create Turtle Island, where we all live. Again, need to realize how important animal spirits are. And a lot of, not just the panthers and the bison, but the little animals, loon, turtle, muskrat, are very important. Except in the hierarchical cultures where, among the Natchez, that Natchez, Mississippi is named after, their upper class was descended directly from the sun god. And they wore copper earrings, giant spools of copper in their ears, so that when they turned their head, that giant spool of copper would glint in the sun. If any commoner was caught trying to put copper jewelry in their ears, they would be executed. You're not a child of the sun. You can't wear that symbol of the sun. The hierarchical cultures along the Mississippi River also practiced human sacrifice of their commoners for the benefit of their ruling classes and for the benefit of everyone else. And I have one more thing I want to say about Native American religions in general. They were not dualistic. No devil. That's why no heaven and hell, no reward and punishment. But they did have morality. Goodness rather than punishment for badness. A lot of Native American religions, just about every one that I can think of that I know something about, had tricksters. Tricksters are not devils. Tricksters are a mixed bag. They want to get away with stuff, and they often, in the course of trying to get away with something, will actually create something good. For example, Hone, the grandson of Mount St. Helens, saw people catching fish and saw bears catching fish, and he wanted to catch all the fish. So he invented the fishing net, but he didn't invent it to catch fish. he invented the fishing net to catch all the bears and to catch all the people so that all the fish would be left for him. Well, the bears had claws and they got out, and the people had knives and they got out. And then the people were wise enough, after they escaped the net, they said, hey, we could use that on the fish. So the trickster god Hone, trying to get away with stealing all the fish, actually wound up teaching the people how to make fishing nets. And everybody's lives are better for it on the Northwest coast. Aren't you glad we have tricksters?
That's a great story. Thank you, Linda. This has been a wonderful presentation. I have to admire you for undertaking. How in the world do you cover such a broad subject and so many different tribes, so many cultures in such a short time? But you've given us a lot to think about. I can't help but think to add historically, one of the things, and we think of what most of us European history taught us in this country, we think back to wanting to cut hair, abolishing language, turning the natives into farmers, etc. But there was nothing more frightening really than religious practices. In the late 19th century, the last of the great Indian wars basically were stimulated by resurrections of native religious practices, which scared the local white communities and prompted the military to come in and react. And just as an historical note, I guess that fear continued. It wasn't until 1978, with the passage of the American Indian Religious Freedom Act, and signed by then President Carter. So even up until not so long ago in our own history, these things were still viewed as mysteries and somewhat frightening. So thank you for continuing to share and study this. And I hope others have been stimulated. So we want to be sure, as you said, to leave some time for other comments or questions from our participants.
Ask me questions. I noticed there's a comment talking about powwows and inviting veterans. Yes. When I had been to, I don't know how many Native American powwows, and then I went to my first Highland Games after I moved here. And to me, the Highland Games is a powwow for white people. They have a grand entry. The clan leaders are likely to have a feather in their tam. The women are often waving feather fans, and they often have a shawl draped over their arm. Powwow for white people. But yes, just like the Scottish clans, in fact, did you know that the English considered the Scottish very primitive and figured out fairly early on that one way to subdue the warlike Scots was to give them high-ranked and very ritualized positions in the English military. And of course, the English word for a Scottish leader is a chief. So when the English arrived here and they met the Indians, they said, where's your leader? And they said, oh, he is Powhatan, whatever. And the English said, that must be their word for chief. They're just like Scotsmen. And so to this day, we call the leaders of Indians chiefs, just like Scotsmen.
Claire has asked the question about the role of mood or mind-altering herbs in spiritual practices, and I think that's another.
Oh yes,
question.
That was something else I could have gotten to, but I didn't. Yeah, nothing fermented, no alcohol, pulque. You had to get pretty far south before you ran into any fermented beverages. And yes, they would be used in ritual, but a lot of non-fermented beverages like chocolate, cocoa, chocolate was used as a beverage by the Aztec and the Maya, and it was sacred. And the sacred strawberry juice of the Iroquois. And then we have the black drink of the southeastern cult, which was a religion that was spread, all the trade on the southern rivers, that people were able to travel all over the place and trade. Mica from Watauga County is found in Ohio and North Dakota and Florida and New York, and quahog shells, clam shells from Maine are found in Florida. And all that trade also spread religious practices and ideas and symbols and paraphernalia. So in the southeastern cult, which was shared along a lot of these trade routes as far north as Ohio, they had the black drink.
It's interesting too
The
that
black drink would get you high. Human sacrifices were given the black drink so that they would enjoy being killed and find it very spiritual and not give anybody a hard time. Anybody know what popular beverage originally had the black drink in it?
Was it Coca-Cola?
Nope, that had cocaine. A sacred herb to the South American people. Ilex cascina, it's in the holly family, and it was originally in Dr. Pepper. Dr. Pepper, Indian medicine. And you, of course, just like Coca-Cola, it originally, the only place you could go to get it was the drugstore. That's how those soda fountains wound up in drugstores instead of anywhere else.
But back to your earlier point too about the sacred nature of animals and the spirits we're seeing, but plants were viewed that way too. So it's not like we,
Yes, yeah,
in our cultures have
tobacco,
used plants and
particularly.
tobacco. Obviously,
Yeah.
almost every culture that was a prayerful, sacred offering that showed respect and a gift to the gods as you prayed.
It was also used as a beverage. You usually puke your guts out and have a spiritual experience. And I suppose I should mention that purgatives, things that would make you vomit and or have diarrhea, were used as part of purification rituals.
Other
Also,
questions, comments?
I want to get back to the powwow
Yeah.
and the military being honored at powwows in the United States. My dad was fascinated by Indians, and unfortunately he died before I could ever take him to a powwow. I was on the verge of doing my dissertation when he passed away. And then when I moved to North Dakota, I went to an awful lot of powwows, and I always cried at powwows. Because he was, oh God, he was in World War II, Omaha Beach, Battle for St. Lo, Battle of the Bulge, the Ardennes. He was in all those big ones and made it through. And I always wish, I think back, I wish I could have honored him at a powwow. And one of the things that they do, eagle feathers are sacred. Animals that exist in more than one level of creation, eagles on the ground eating carrion and then flying higher than other visual birds that we can see, or bears that live on the surface of the earth and then sleep in a cave. That's more than one level of creation. So eagle feathers are sacred. And when an eagle feather falls off of a dancer in the middle of a dance, the powwow will stop. And I'm going to choke up here. It's a fallen warrior, maybe lost in the dirt, never given a proper burial, or just one who never received enough honor in his lifetime, but a fallen eagle feather at a powwow, all the Indians will stop. And who tries to take a photograph, because it is the spirit of a fallen warrior who needs recognition, who needs to be honored for fighting for his people. And Native Americans enroll in the United States military at a higher rate than any other ethnic group in the country. They are our Scotsmen.
It is one of those things that's probably hard for most of us to really understand and appreciate, that that's always been so respected in all those cultures.
You know, someone has commented that Moxie was an herbal drink. Any idea what was in that? And did it get people high, or was it just like the Iroquois strawberry juice? The person who cited that know? Jeffrey? Any idea what was in Moxie?
Cranberry.
Possibly. I'm gonna have to look that up. I don't know.
Well, I'll leave the chat open for any more questions, but in the meantime, I'd like to thank you, Dr. Jensen. That was a wonderful presentation. We feel very lucky to have you. We learned such specialized information from an expert, and we really value your volunteer time. In the meantime, I would like to share our next program with High Country Lifelong Learners. Will be October. I'm going to share my screen really quick. It's going to be October 25th with Nikki Robinson, the North Carolina project managers of the Wildlands Network, and she'll be speaking about prioritizing wildlife road crossings, and you can register through that same High Country Lifelong Learners website, and that will take you to the AARP link. So thank you for everyone who has participated today and our speaker. I'm going to pass it over to James. He's going to have a quick poll for you guys, and then we'll let you guys off. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, audience.
So yes, so thank you again, Linda, for your time, and thanks everyone else for tuning in. So I'm going to open up a short poll here on Zoom, and let's see if we can get this going. So it should be open. We'd really appreciate the feedback. And then I'm also going to throw a open-ended question in the chat, just asking if there's any suggested speakers and or topics for the future that you'd like to see. So just don't be afraid to throw some answers out there.
While folks are doing that, Linda, did you see that Jeffrey noted that the Moxie included ginseng, which we would appreciate?
Yes, I
from
see that.
Appalachia?
So it wasn't just mica that came from here. There would have been people coming up here for saying.
I think you can close, James.
Awesome. Well, thank you, everybody. And if you have anyone that you would like to hear from in the future, you can reach out to us through Jill's email should be through the App State website, correct? Or do you want me to post it in here? But if you would like to speak to volunteer your time and speak to the High Country Lifelong Learners, or you have someone else that you'd really like to hear from, we'd love to hear that feedback. So thank you guys so much. We hope you have a great week.
Looks like you inspired James. He's already talking to the birds.
Yes. Yes.
Thank you all for joining. Thank you so much, Dr. Jensen. We really appreciate your time and your presentation
welcome.
today. Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.
All right, bye-bye. Thank you all. Good job, team. What's that?